Listen up, class. Okay. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. We so appreciate it. Before we get started, I would like to welcome up John Diener. He's the Vice President of the Ottawa Jewish Historical Society. He will come up and introduce our speaker. There is one amendment to the program before we get started. I have it here that we're going to take a small break. We're going to do the lecture and then jump right into the question period. If anybody needs food at any point, just off to the right-hand side. Otherwise, please enjoy the evening. And John Diener, everyone.
Thank you, Stephen. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's talk. It's the latest of the Ottawa Jewish Historical Society Shirley Berman Memorial Lecture Series. Our Society President, Terry Levine, is not able to attend, so she turned the duties over to me as Vice President of the Society. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the wonderful work of Tegan, who was just up here. She serves in two interconnected roles. First, as the archivist at the Ottawa Jewish Archives, and secondly, as Executive Director of the Ottawa Jewish Historical Society. She's a real asset to our community and goes above and beyond to preserve and promote our history. Tegan is not only an archivist, but a marketer as well, as demonstrated by the merchandise that's available for purchase. So if you're looking for a t-shirt, a sweatshirt, a book, a coffee mug with an Ottawa Jewish theme, please check out the table in the back room. Judging by the turnout tonight, and the similar programs we've had, the work of the Society is considered so important to our community. We're hoping that many of you who are here tonight and have taken part in previous Society programs appreciate the work and will consider either becoming a member or donating to the Society so that we continue to do even more. You can sign up here this evening or on the Society website. We're proud of the fairly new site, which is worth checking out. It's easy to find at ojhs.ca. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker. David C. Martin is an Ottawa-based historian who has been writing about our city for the last several years. David completed his bachelor's degree at Carleton, his master's at Dalhousie, and his PhD work at Queen's. While David's areas of expertise concern 19th century Canadian politics and Crown Indigenous relations, he's been volunteering some of his time to research and writing for the Ottawa Jewish Archives. In addition to his academic publications, David also writes for the public. His occasional columns can be found in both the Ottawa Citizen and the Montreal Herald. While most of his off time is spent with his wife Arshina and son Theo, he also serves as a director for the Historical Society of Ottawa. David, come on up.
Thank you very much. Everyone can hear me? Thank you, John, and thank you to the Historical Society for having me. Thank you all for being here. It's a good turnout. I think they should be happy. Thank you to Tegan, who's always so helpful in anything having to do with the Jewish community. So a couple of apologies to start in a perhaps quintessentially Canadian way. I'm not going to be able to go into as many businesses as I'd like, or as perhaps you would like. I received a number of emails, and I thank you all for them. But because of the limits of time and my preference to go deep rather than broad, I'm only going to be looking at 6 businesses today, although at the end of the speech, I do have an honor roll. So we're going to look at least a number of images of the businesses that I neglect. My second apology concerns my public speaking ability. My wife tells me I am more comfortable in the company of books than crowds, so hopefully you will indulge me. I do have a speech prepared rather than giving extemporaneous remarks, but we'll see how it goes. So with that said, let's just jump right in. The first business that we're going to look at today is, of course, the Rideau Bakery, because how could you not? It seems quite likely to me that of all the shops and restaurants and other businesses that have contributed to the history of Jewish Ottawa, few inspire the same sort of nostalgic melancholy as does the Rideau Bakery. Owing perhaps to its longevity, or maybe just to the magical scent of freshly baked bread, the bakery occupies a special place in the hearts and minds of virtually every member of Ottawa's Jewish community. The origins of Rideau Bakery trace back well over a century to Ukraine, where a woman named Rivka began baking and selling bread to help support her husband Moishe, a Hebrew teacher, and their 12 children. Perhaps unwittingly, Rivka laid the groundwork for almost a century of good eats in our nation's capital. How many Shabbos challahs, pastrami on rye lunches, and chocolate donut-faced toddlers do we owe to this intrepid lady? Perhaps we'll never know. In 1926, two of Rivka's sons, Avi and Dovid, first arrived in Ottawa, bringing with them the recipes, experiences, and perhaps even sourdough starter given to them by their pioneering mother. A few years later, in 1930, Avi and Dovid set up shop at Rideau in Nelson, and thus began the great saga of the Rideau Bakery. With most of your memories of the place likely positive, the Kardish family went through a great deal of strife over the course of their 9 decades in business. Joy and generosity were regularly balanced by hardship and even tragedy. One of the brothers' earliest challenges came way back in 1933, when a horse trading business deal with one Mr. Wilson of Surville took an ugly turn. As part of the deal, the bakery was to receive a horse in exchange for a $30 check, which the brothers claimed was only to be cashed once they determined that the Wilson's horse was satisfactory. Now, presumably, Avi and Dovid determined the horse was not satisfactory as they stopped payment on the check, angering Mr. Wilson, who returned to the bakery threatening that unless they made good, he would file criminal charges. Coincidentally, the brothers had neglected to affix an excise stamp to their check, and at the time it appears that that was indeed a criminal act. Ultimately, the whole affair turned out fine for the bakery. The magistrate who heard the case was unimpressed with Mr. Wilson's attempt at, quote, petty revenge, and the charges were quickly dismissed. The next major stumbling block for the bakery posed a far greater challenge. In the year 1947, which we might describe as the bakery's annus horribilis, to borrow a phrase from our late queen, two tragedies struck. On February 26, 1947, the Citizen reported on a major fire that broke out in a grocery store located right next to the bakery at 352 Rideau. The Rideau bakery was destroyed, and the family was forced to relocate the business to Clarence Street, which remained its sole location until 1965, when a second storefront was opened at 384 Rideau. In 1970, the Clarence Street location would be expropriated by the city to make room for a new housing development, prompting the family to relocate their second storefront to Bank Street. The second great misfortune to befall the family in 1947 occurred on December 12th, when at just 61 years old, Dovid Kardish passed away. Dovid's death marked a point of transition as the second Kardish generation now took the reins of the business, or perhaps the third if you count Rivka as the first. When the baked goods continued to flow, so did challenges for the Rideau bakery. Throughout the 1970s, one issue that troubled the entire food service industry concerned the cost of ingredients. In August 1973, Izzy Kardish and his family were forced to raise the price of a 24-ounce loaf of French bread from 30 to 45 cents. As flour, which was once sold at, I know it sounds like a steal, as flour, which once sold for $6 a bag, had since risen to 15. By January 1979, that same loaf cost customers 67 cents, a rate of increase that outpaces even our post-COVID inflationary woes. Despite economic hardship, it seems that the generous spirit of the Rideau Bakery and its employees never really dampened. In October 1979, for example, the bakery was able to gift a large anniversary cake to the 200 members of the Jewish Golden Age Club, part of the National Council of Jewish Women, for their 25th anniversary. Another anecdotal display of kindness and generosity, perhaps my personal favorite, comes from a May 13, 1982 newspaper entry entitled, "This is what a good start to the day looks like." The paper tells the story of Jan Barnaby of Norbury Crescent, who on a particularly busy drive to work one morning, noticed a Rideau bakery truck trying to squeeze into traffic on Bank near Alta Vista. As her car inched along, she recalls no one was willing to let the truck in, so as she passed by, Jan stopped to let the driver into the northbound flow. As soon as the truck was safely in traffic, it stopped, the door swung open, and the driver ran back to her car to hand her a freshly baked loaf of rye bread, still warm from the oven. Barnaby noted that the wonderful smell of fresh bread filled her car all the way to work. Traffic wasn't the only minor woe for the bakery and its staff in the 1980s, as it appears that they fielded a softball team in the Jewish Men's Softball League, at least briefly, early in the decade. They were not very good. Now, to be fair, there are only a handful of the team's scores that appear in the Rideau's press, and they do seem to have improved as the season progressed. On June 3rd, 1982, Rideau Bakery lost to a team from Baker Meadow, 17-5. The next week, up against B'nai Ottawa Lodge 8-5, the team lost 7-4. On July 5th, 1982, when it finally seemed that their luck had changed, their opponents from Video Warehouse somehow managed to come back from an 8-0 deficit, and the Rideau Bakery again lost, this time 11-10. It's an improvement. There were always small kindnesses to be found at the bakery, whether when lunch counter customers chipped in to pay for the meal of a less fortunate diner, or when a trusting staff member didn't hesitate to say, "Pay next time," to customer Sue Pritchard when she didn't have quite enough cash on hand. Rideau was always a community. Larger gestures of neighborly generosity also managed to endure. That's my son. Larger gestures of neighborly generosity also managed to endure. Like, for example, when in 2002, the Rideau Bakery teamed up with the RCMP to enter a charity gingerbread house competition for Habitat for Humanity. With a $250 donation for entry and 30 to 40 hours of design and decoration, the team managed to create a gingerbread replica of a log building located near the RCMP stables in the city's East End. Commenting on the entries, the citizen noted that the gingerbread designs had to be no more than 18 inches in height, width, and length. Yet the inventive use of pretzel fences, licorice and shredded wheat roofs, cinnamon stick logs, candy cane trees, coconut snow, and land-scraping scenery exceeded everyone's expectations. And that is a poor black and white picture of the house, but I imagine it was more impressive than that. As we all know far too well, in the summer of 2019, the Rideau Bakery, where family tradition was baked in, finally closed its doors for good. Louis Kardish told the Ottawa Jewish Bulletin that with declining sales and with being diagnosed with lymphoma, the brothers simply had the wins taken from their sales and could no longer continue. A silver lining perhaps came when Farm Boy announced that it had purchased rights to the business and that Rideau Bakery goods would be available at its stores across Ontario. As for their former premises, are the Farm Boy goods as good as it used to be? No. Yeah. A faint silver lining then. As for their former premises, in November 2020, the Ottawa Mission was granted a 7-year lease to the Rideau Street storefront. For just $10 annually, the Mission found a home for its food service training program, which teaches homeless and precariously housed people the skills they need to work in the industry. While the Kardish family and their staff at the Rideau Bakery may not have been much for softball, they baked one hell of a rye bread and will forever hold a special place in the hearts and longing stomachs of Ottawa's Jewish community. Now, the next business that we're going to look at on our trek down memory lane is Nate's Deli. How do we feel about okay, good. Two good choices so far. Nate's owner, Dave Smith, grew up in Lowertown, the youngest of 13 children born to Jewish Russian immigrant parents. His father, a shoemaker, regularly entertained guests, keeping a pot of stew on the stove for whomever might have stopped by. In 1959, when he was 26, David, his sister Frida, and brothers Jack and Nathan went into business in a rented Rideau Street house. According to a 2010 article in The Citizen, the siblings used Nathan's name for the new place because it sounded the most Jewish, an asset for perhaps few things other than a deli. At first, the deli only had 4 tables. Customers lined up to get in, lined up to get out, and unless you were amongst the 8 lucky enough to snag a seat at any given time, you ate while standing up. It was Ottawa in 1960, and smoked meat was exotic. Smoked meat smelled like Montreal and New York. The building at 316 Rideau, small as it was in the beginning, made an instant name for itself. Opening at 6 a.m. and staying open until 2 a.m., we only closed to clean up, owner Dave Smith told Citizen columnist Kelly Egan. It wasn't long before Nate's became the capital's iconic deli, famous for its smoked meat and chopped liver. Over their many years in business, celebrities like Liberace, Paul Anka, John Lennon, Yoko Ono, and Rich Little all made regular appearances, especially after 1970 when the restaurant expanded into the place next door, a slightly more upscale edition. Dave himself recalled how Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau had come through the deli's backyard, parked his little convertible, and got food for Margaret and the kids. As far as he was concerned, the Trudeau children grew up on chopped liver and smoked meat. I could make a crack about Justin and being a meathead or something, but I won't do that. Just came to mind. Former Mayor Jim Watson once said that he knew he had made it in the city of Ottawa when Dave Smith knew his name. At Nate's, it wasn't unusual to see people in tuxedos headed to the Arts Centre, sat next to people in jeans and t-shirts. The clientele was always a mixed bag. Perhaps not surprisingly, given its prime location, a constant stream of developers always came knocking on Nate's door, peppering Dave with offers. After finally relenting and accepting an offer he just couldn't refuse, Smith would later recall that he was very angry at himself for accepting it, as there was lots of history there. By the time it closed on May 31st, 2010, Nate's made its own chopped liver, 24 pounds a day, and went through 1,500 pounds of smoked meat a week. It closed on its 50th anniversary. Dave Smith, born January 23, 1933, passed away September 4th, 2020, and was described as one of our city's most generous and energetic community builders. His legacy will no doubt long endure as he gave back to our city and to those most in need like few others could. Smith was associated with virtually every significant fundraiser that the city ever had, and it's estimated that over the course of his life, he raised as much as $140 million for charity. The Dave Smith Youth Treatment Center, for example, founded in 1993 to help young people struggling with addiction, continues to affect the lives of hundreds each year with both live-in and aftercare services. Recognized via the Order of Canada, the Order of Ontario, and the City of Ottawa with a street named in his honor, Dave's generosity of spirit and the quality of his smoked meat will long be cherished. Is that a phone? Not for me. Okay, now let's take a turn away from the food service industry and toward an equally prolific, perhaps more prolific area of business, and that would be retail. Born June 6, 1880 in Virbilis, Lithuania, Archibald Jacob Freeman arrived in Hamilton with his parents and sisters in 1893. Changing his name from Aharon Yaakov to Archibald Jacob, presumably in hopes of better integrating into his new country, AJ followed his father from Hamilton to Ottawa in 1899, where the young entrepreneur opened the Canada House Furnishing Company at 222 Rideau. Alongside business partner Moses Kramer, together the partners sold carpets, oilcloth, and other types of household furnishings. They were so successful so quickly that just 1 year after its founding, the store was enlarged to include street numbers 221 and 223. And in 1902, the business was moved to still larger premises at 73 Rideau. After arriving in Ottawa as a still young man, Archie was also quick to immerse himself in the city's culture, both Jewish and Gentile, building friendships with some of the country's most notable luminaries, including Wilfrid Laurier, William Lyon Mackenzie King, and the Governor-General Lord Tweedsmuir. Still in his early 20s, Archie helped to establish Ottawa's first synagogue, Adas Yesharim, on King Edward Avenue, and was elected president of the congregation, a position he held continuously for the next 26 years. On August 18, 1903, Archie married Lillian Bilson, a woman 5 years his junior. Together, the pair have 4 children, including one who the couple adopted, and the family committed much of itself to charitable causes. In 1919, Archie was elected president of the Canadian Zionist Association, a post he held until his death in 1944. He also served on the boards of the Ottawa Hockey Association, the Retail Merchants Association, and the Ottawa Canadian Club. Still more, Archie was also president of Ottawa Vad Chair from its inception in 1934 until his death 10 years later. Shortly after the store's expansion in 1903, the Kramer-Freeman partnership dissolved, and into Kramer's shoes stepped Hirsch Freeman, AJ's father. Together, the father and son duo continued the business at 73 Rideau under a new firm name, H. Freeman and Son, until Archie became the sole owner of the business, having bought out his father who went into retirement. Slowly, the store's inventory expanded as Freeman's added men's and women's fashions and other household goods, until A.J. Freeman Limited was indeed a full-fledged department store. In the years that followed, the business flourished, remaining in the family under the leadership of Freeman's son, Lawrence, all the way through to 1971, when it was finally sold to the Hudson Bay Company. Throughout its long and storied history, Freeman's earned a reputation as one store always able to keep up with the changing times. It was one of the first stores in Ottawa to operate an escalator, and as the city's population expanded into the suburbs following World War II, Freeman's followed suit, opening a branch store in Ottawa's first mall, the Westgate Shopping Centre on Carling Avenue. Additional moves to match an ever-shifting public mood came through Freeman's introduction of a basement discount outlet for the budget-conscious, in-house boutiques for the fashion-minded, and a phone-in service called Freeman's Byline, which allowed customers to pay for their purchases on credit and over time. Certainly successful businessmen, there was still more to A.J. Freeman and his son Lawrence, who each stood in his own right as a pillar of the community. As A.J. was a leading Canadian Zionist and major philanthropist, we might say that the apple didn't fall too far from the tree, as his son Lawrence served as president of the Zionist Organization of Canada and also as chairman of the board of the National Arts Centre. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, Ottawa's retail scene was expanded rapidly. In the summer of 1971 alone, no less than 8 new department stores were either under consideration or active construction. With the likes of Eaton's and Simpson Sears gaining footholds in the city, it wasn't long before the HBC decided to move in as well. In August 1971, the firm approached Lawrence Freeman with an offer of takeover. With no prospect of passing the store on to the next generation of Freemans, and in ailing health himself, Lawrence accepted the offer, but only once he was assured that the Hudson Bay Company would honor the pension commitments he had made to his staff. Another giant in Ottawa's retail scene, one that began without distinction in the Jewish community, but which became unique as it linked Ottawa's Jews to one of Canada's founding peoples, is La Roque's. La Roque's began in 1909 when Joseph Alphonse La Roque launched his eponymous dry goods business at 270 Dalhousie Street. It was a small store, just about 400 square feet, but it quickly met with great success. In 1911, La Roque expanded, buying out the stock of the Parisian Milliners, a neighboring store on Dalhousie Street, at just over 50 cents on the dollar. He immediately began to advertise hats and feathers for sale at bargain prices. The store boasted of its Japanese silks available in all colors at only 21 cents a yard, and of its being the only distributor in Lower Town of Butterick Fashion's dress patterns. La Roque's was also noted as the sole distributor of the famous D&A corsets made by the Dominion Corset Manufacturing Company of Montreal. All sizes were available. On the cultural side, J. La Roque and his company became champions of Ottawa's francophones. In March 1913, for example, the J. La Roque Company supported the inaugural issue of Le Droit, Ottawa's French-language newspaper. That same year, 1913, the Citizen reported that J.A. La Roque was an energetic businessman who gives personal direction to his business. The newspaper added that his department store had made rapid strides in the business world, and that his window displays routinely indicated the high quality of his merchandise. In 1922, the opportunity Mr. La Roque had been waiting for came to pass. The city of Ottawa put up for sale its property on Dalhousie Street, between Rideau and George. Mr. La Roque had been assembling properties next to the city-owned land, and the addition of the city's property would give him enough land for his new project. A story perhaps of a businessman whose reach exceeded his grasp, the new store was a financial stretch for Alphonse La Roque, who would soon be forced to reconsider the pace of his business's growth. The new 3-story building with a basement was built at a cost of roughly $200,000. Including land and stock, the enterprise had a value of $500,000, a huge sum of money at the time. Contemporary advertising boasted of the store's home-like atmosphere and its courteous and experienced staff of some 50 bilingual clerks. The Ottawa Journal described it as one of the most beautiful stores in the city. It also noted the Laroque store has the greatest number of display windows, 2 on Rideau, 2 on George, and 16 on Dalhousie. Despite all this, or perhaps because of it, the business did not thrive. Unlike its competitors, it didn't do much advertising. This was probably a sign of weakness rather than strength, despite its claim to be the store that does not advertise. Laroque tried to claim that it devoted the savings from not advertising to lowering prices, but it wasn't enough. J. Laroque Company Limited went bankrupt in September 1926, and its goods were sold off at about 46 cents on the dollar. The department store was purchased by Weinberg, Woodman and Company, a Nova Scotian department store chain that had begun operations in 1904. The firm was owned by Harry and Saul Goodman of Pictou County, Nova Scotia, and by their relations through marriage, the Weinberg family of Montreal. Despite the change in ownership, Laroque's remained true to its French-Canadian heritage, continuing to offer bilingual service to its customers. In October 1930, on the 27th anniversary of the Weinberg-Goodman Company, it sponsored a Laroque radio show of French-Canadian folk songs and dance music. In 1931, the Goodmans and Weinbergs went their separate ways, with the Weinberg family taking sole control of Laroque Registered in Ottawa. That year, Joseph Hirsch Weinberg moved his family from Montreal to Ottawa to become manager of the Laroque store. 2 years later, he took full control of the company. Coincidentally, that same year, Alphonse Laroque staged a comeback, launching another J.A. Laroque department store. The new store operated at 269 Dalhousie Street at the corner of Murray, just across from where he started his original business in 1909. Confusingly, there were now 2 Laroque department stores on the same street within just a few blocks of each other. In a repeat of history, however, by 1934, Mr. Laroque's second store failed. Its stock again bought out by the Weinberg family and sold off at bargain prices. The Weinberg's Laroque Registered prospered for more than 4 decades, with its principal clientele being Lower Town's Francophone community. When Joseph Weinberg retired in 1947, control of the firm passed to his sons, who became president and vice president of the company. In his retirement, Joseph Weinberg, like many of his great contemporaries, was an active supporter of Ottawa's Jewish community. Alongside his other charitable endeavors, which included the Boy Scouts and the YMCA, Weinberg was appointed a lifetime member of the Children's Aid Society for his exemplary leadership and long-standing service. Joseph passed away in December 1967. 4 years after his passing, Laroque's also passed from Ottawa's retail scene. Its loss a shock to the largely Francophone staff and clientele. The Weinberg brothers explained that Laroque's was caught in a retail no man's land, too small to compete with the national chain stores that were entering the market, but too big to compete with specialized boutiques. Vacant for a few months, the old Laroque store became, for a while, the temporary home of Kaplan's department store, which was in mid-1972 in the process of a $1 million expansion. And I think that is a perfect segue to go into our next store, which happens to be Kaplan's. Who remembers Kaplan's? Hey. Everybody but here. Casper Kaplan's rag to riches story is especially notable, as it epitomizes the opportunity for success that Canada granted its earliest Jewish arrivals, something that was almost unimaginable for the vast majority who arrived here from Eastern Europe and the former Russian Empire. Casper Kaplan was a Lithuanian-born Jewish immigrant who began his life in Ottawa as a peddler, like so many others. Arriving in 1892-93 at the age of 22. With just 63 cents in his pocket, Kaplan launched his career as a salesman, using a horse and buggy to sell small wares. Often forced to use the barter system, given the worldwide economic climate of the time, he exchanged merchandise for dairy and other farm and garden produce, which he subsequently sold across the then still small though growing city of Ottawa. In 1897, Kaplan married Dora Rostin of Montreal, and that same year, he opened his first store on Rideau Street, moving it 2 years later to Le Breton Flats. In 1900, he unfortunately lost his store in the Great Ottawa Hall Fire, which consumed so much of the city. Motivated by an intrepid spirit of entrepreneurship and with a young family to feed, Kaplan again began peddling door to door, which he continued for another 5 full years before finally accumulating enough capital to open a second store, this time at 491 Sussex. Called Ottawa and Hull Furnishings, it sold men's and women's clothing on the main floor and linoleum in the basement. It also had living quarters on the second and third floors. Growing larger, the store eventually moved to grander quarters at 135 Rideau Street at Sussex, where Kaplan added a furniture department, quickly becoming a full-fledged department store, C. Kaplan Limited. This storefront stretched all the way from Rideau to George, and boasted of being electrified, a rare commodity at the time, which allowed late-night shopping under carbon arc lighting. It was at this location that C. Kaplan Limited grew into a 5-floor behemoth, allowing it, alongside its competitors, Ogilvy's and Freeman's, to make Rideau Street the most important retail street in the city. When Casper passed away in 1943, his sons Gordon and Sam continued to run the store until it closed for good in 1984. According to the two brothers, it was 4 years of near constant construction that ultimately led to the store's closure, though the 1983 opening of the Rideau Centre certainly could not have helped. For those that retain personal memories of Kaplan's, it's most likely the elaborate window displays that first come to mind. During the Christmas season, Ottawans would frequent the area just to grab a glimpse of the holiday magic that Kaplan's always best captured. Before continuing our walk down memory lane, Rideau Street of yesteryear, I just want to note that many of these individuals, like Caspar Kaplan and Freeman, were exceptional. Not all Jewish peddlers became wealthy department store owners or wholesale merchants, and many more failed than succeeded. If you look at the early Ottawa business directories, it's clear that many of the businesses, both Jewish-owned and otherwise, which operated in any one year, didn't appear the following year. And I'd hate to leave you with the misimpression of the stakes or difficulties faced by the city's earliest Jewish migrants. Now, with that said, the next business that we're going to look at, it's a real doozy. Less perhaps for its economic or cultural impact than for the monumental scandal that it was attached to it. And that is Edelson. Everyone knows, huh? Not a secret. Cat's out of the bag. Benjamin Ben Simon Edelson and his wife Alice first visited Ottawa from Montreal in 1920, and soon after decided to move to the city. Once a struggling immigrant, Benjamin Edelson could soon be counted among Ottawa's many Jewish success stories. He was born in then Russia, today Latvia, on the 27th of March, 1890. By 1897, his small town, located some 50 miles southeast of Riga, had about 5,000 residents, over 3,000 of whom were Jews. Ben's father, Joseph Pinkus, owned an inn and served as a shamus of his synagogue. He and his wife Zelda had 5 children. Ben was the youngest, a studious and intellectual boy whom his parents hoped would become a rabbi. But the entrepreneurial Ben had different ideas. His older brothers had gone to Moscow to train as jewelers and had prospered, impressing Ben on their visits back home with expensive gold chains and watches. At 15 years of age, Ben declared that he too would be a jeweler, and in 1905 he apprenticed in Warsaw, becoming a skilled watchmaker and engraver. Following behind his 2 elder brothers, in the summer of 1907, Ben, then 17 years old, left Riga for New York. Once in America, he fell in love with the young Alice Koblenz, whom he had met through his mother. On August 17, 1912, in the Bronx, 22-year-old Ben Edelson and almost 16-year-old Alice Koblenz married, and less than a year later, in April 1913, at the invitation of Ben's uncle, the couple settled in Montreal. It wasn't long before Ben and Alice owned their first store in Montreal, where Ben repaired, cleaned, and built watches, and where Alice designed hats before branching out to open a beauty salon. In September of 1920, 30-year-old Ben, almost 24-year-old Alice, and their 4 children moved from Montreal to Ottawa. By 1931, Ottawa was a city of about 150,000, and it had the 4th largest Jewish community in Canada. Still, with only about 3,300 Jewish inhabitants, It lagged far behind Montreal and Toronto, which each hosted about 50,000. Third in line was Winnipeg, which would have had about 15,000 at the time, in case you're curious. After renting places, first on Friel Street and then on Nelson Street, the Edelsons bought a home in 1924 at number 203 Friel, on the northeast corner at Rideau. Thanks to affordable properties in Ottawa requiring only a small down payment, they were able to purchase a house from Castler Kaplan, who was by this point, as we just heard, a wealthy department store owner. Now, luckily for the Edelsons, the jewelry trade was disproportionately populated by Jews. Indeed, the first Jewish resident of Ottawa, Moses Bilski, had been a jeweler, and by 1931, Jews constituted about 20% of Ottawa's jewelry retailers, who had pioneered the Edelsons' way. Ben set up shop in various locations, first at Sussex Street, then on Nelson Street, and then by 1925 at 24 Rideau Street, where he purchased a much larger established jewelry and pawnbroker store. The store offered a variety of merchandise and services. It sold the usual giftware, including china plate settings, sterling silver and fancy pen sets, jewelry either from reputable companies or designed in store, and fine diamonds. It also restored and engraved jewelry. First and foremost, however, the store provided expert watch repair. Alice Edison was also a pillar of the community in her own right. She was an active member of both Agudat Israeli Sisterhood and Hadassah Canada. She regularly led State of Israel bond campaigns in the late 1950s and 60s, and even organized a special Bar Mitzvah year celebration in 1961 for the Ottawa Committee, in which girls and boys were encouraged to invest money they received in State of Israel bonds. Edelson's was in business for 83 years, but the family's most historically notable year was unquestionably 1931, when they became engulfed in controversy, as Ben was charged with the murder of fellow jeweler Jack Horowitz. You see, Ben had been aware for some time that Alice and Jack had been carrying on an affair, and on the night of the 24th of November 1931, Ben, his wife Alice, and her lover Jack were determined to, quote, settle the thing. In fact, evidence suggests that almost 3 years before, in early 1929, Jack's wife Yetta and Alice's husband Ben had both learned of the affair. Yetta and Ben each maintained that they had heard the news from the other. Regardless, on that night, when the three met at Edelson Jewelers on Rideau Street, words flew, a struggle ensued, and Jack Horowitz was shot. His death a few hours later would mark the start of a sensational legal case in which 41-year-old Ben Edelson was accused of murder and facing the gallows. For weeks, the case captured headlines in the city's two newspapers, the Ottawa Citizen and the Ottawa Journal, which each covered the case in extensive detail. The lives of the Edelsons, which by this point had been that of exemplary public-facing community leaders, made the case that much more intriguing. Ben and Alice were fixtures in Lower Town's religious, philanthropic, and social institutions. And even if not all of Ottawa's Jews knew the families personally, they were linked to those who did. It's important to note that at this time, virulent expressions of anti-Semitism, unlike our time, were common, if not pervasive. The 1930s were really the bleakest period for Canada's Jews. Against the backdrop of the Great Depression and anxiety about the financial burden of ethnic immigrants, nationalist, fascist, and French Catholic rhetoric, immigration quotas alongside professional, academic, and social barriers all served to reinforce the inferior status of Jews in society. Somehow, despite the climate, the Edelson-Horowitz case elicited virtually no anti-Semitic response in either the English or French language press. Even in the courtroom, Ben's immigrant and religious background was never ridiculed, and in the end clearly had little impact on the outcome. In January 1932, 6 weeks following the shooting, Ben Edelson was acquitted. After Ben's acquittal, the whole affair was rarely spoken of again. The incident received much attention in the media of the day, but was subsequently subject to collective forgetting by Ottawa's Jewish community, although you all heard about it. The case did become the subject of Monda Halpern's book, Alice in Shondaland, published in June 2015. So if you'd like to learn more about the case, you can pick up a copy. With that bit of intrigue behind us, and judging by the look on my 5-year-old's face, I'm going to wrap up here. But before I do, I'd like to take a moment to show you just a few images of some of the many Rideau Street businesses I didn't get to tonight. Here we have Moses Bilski of M. Bilski and Son Limited at 135 Rideau Street, alongside an image of Levin's Dry Goods Store at number 213. On this slide, there's a couple images of the Ottawa Bargain Store, later Schaefer's Department Store at 147 Rideau Street. And there are the Sinks brothers outside their shop, Paramount Tailors, Cleaners and Dryers, 285 Rideau Street. Next up, we have an Ottawa Journal advertisement for George Goldberg's new hair salon, located at 172 Rideau Street. An image of Joe Fellers, 139, and one of Adele Perel in front of the Smoke Bar Kosher Deli at number 354. On this page, we have an image of the Style Shop at 56 Rideau Street, one of Sarah Dworkin, manager of Astor Chapel at 107 Rideau Street, and another of Lawrence Sugarman of Sugarman's Fine Foods, also at number 354. Here we have Rubens Paint Shop and Hardware at 347 Rideau, Dworkin's Furs Building at number 256, and Ritz Limited at number 99 Rideau. You guys are going to have to tell me about these places during the Q&A. Next up is an image taken outside of Mollett's Furs, 181 Rideau. Malot's Furs. And I assume Malot's Drugstore. At number 478, and a receipt from the Sopkoff Fine Furs, located at 176 Rideau. On this page, we have Taylor's IGA Food Liner, once at 245 Rideau Street, and Ray Glenmore Store at 106. It's an image of A. Shapiro of Shapiro's Furs, which could then be found at number 458. And here, Irving Wolf of Wolf's Shoes, which occupied number 92. There's a business card from Max Alton Insurance Agency, once at 326 Rideau, and the garment bag and hanger from the Fine Apparel store located at 204 Rideau Street. I realize again I must have neglected any number of Jewish-owned or connected businesses on Rideau, but I would like to thank you all very much for coming this evening. I hope you enjoyed some of the stories that I had to tell, and I look forward to hearing some of yours. Thank you.
We're happy to take your questions for David. If anybody wants to,
Or comments.
or comments, or stories, anecdotes. Okay, Debbie.
Open mic.
I have to give you a slight correction.
For sure.
After the fire when the store was on the side where La Paloma was, and then the health center, the storefront moved across the street to my Uncle Avy's living room.
Ah,
And we opened Clarence after that, but we brought in bread from Montreal for a while there to keep going.
how long were you in the living room?
Until we got the store from Sugarman's. So we were there for a number of years.
Yeah, we were right next door to Le Bois,
Okay.
on Rideau Street.
Yeah.
My Uncle Avy had the top floor. We had a storefront on Rideau Street, and the other side of that same building was Anna and Nat Clay here. They had a photographic store.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Watch the bird.
Too many chords.
I know.
I just want to mention Cohen's Pharmacy, which was at the corner of Rideau and Cumberland for many, many years. My grandfather, Luke Cohen, and my dad, Izzy Greenberg. And I spent a lot of my childhood serving maybe some of you at Cohen's Pharmacy, which has a special place in my heart.
Thank you.
Just an anecdote, we lived further south, not in a particularly Jewish neighborhood, and I remember my non-Jewish girlfriends in school in the 60s said there was no point in going shopping downtown Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur because all stores were closed.
Not only on Rideau, in the Byward Market as well.
My father, Dave Mirsky, owned Rideau Smoke Shop. I have an old photograph of him there, and it's where the Rideau Center is now. He was renting the spot, and he was offered a chance to buy it and turned it down. Can you imagine an opportunity like that? That's my dad in the middle.
And I'd just like to make a comment on behalf of a good friend, Stan Goldberg. His parents' gift shop, Goldberg's Gift Shop, was an immense success, and everybody went there for their wedding selections and all their gift wear. It's a very prominent store. Ottawa Gift Center, thank you.
I'd like to mention the TISO case. I don't know whether anybody in here knows about it. It's a case fought by E.J. Freeman against Mr. Jean Tissot in around 1935, in which Mr. Tissot tried to organize Christians not to shop in Jewish stores.
He was a police detective.
It was an epic case, won by A.J. Freeman, and he received $1 for winning the case. So I'm bringing it up in case anybody has any interest in looking that up. It's a big case.
I spoke about the TISO case last year when I did the talk with the Byward Market. He was a policeman on the Ottawa Force, and every day he would go into the market stores, I imagine on Rideau Street as well, and look for things that were wrong, that he could find that would give him a reason to delay their opening for the day or to not allow them to open. And basically, he was just, this was his own personal mission. It went to court, as was just mentioned, and I think he eventually lost his job with the Ottawa Police and was moved, went to another police force in Quebec. I think it was in Rouyn-Noranda, if I remember correctly, and he lasted there a few months and they fired him. So.
Hey everybody, Stu Wolf. I'm not related to Wolf Shoes. It's my mother, Leah Kaplan. My grandfather owned Round Seas Furniture on Clarence Street. But I just wanted to mention something interesting. On the website, you had a picture of Freeman's and then you had a circle with her image. And right underneath it was a man standing there. That man was George Joyner, who is one of my best friend's father. And he used to work for the Freemans, worked for EJ and also Lawrence Freeman from 1929 to 1939. Drafted in the Second World War, and they actually saved his job for him when he came back in 1945 and worked there until the Hudson Bay Pump in 1971. And he was the superintendent, and he ran the stores for the Freeman and also Freeworks as well. And he opened up the stores, and he ran all the, he was in charge of all the electricians and plumbers and that kind of stuff. And he had Bayshore, Celeron, and also Westgate as well too. So I just thought it was kind of neat to looking at the picture. I was like, wait a second, I know that photo, like it's exactly the same picture. Then I looked underneath and I was like, that's great.
Wow.
Yes.
Anybody else?
I don't know if people remember the store Ideal Stationery,
Yeah.
and I think just about everybody in this room got the bar mitzvah invitations, the wedding invitations, and the amazing gifts.
My mother used to send me there every year to pick up the special payroll that she would use for our business that she couldn't get anywhere else.
Steve said was my uncle, from Rideau Plumbing. Here where Midford. My uncle Abe Bell owned Rideau Plumbing and Heating, which is on Rideau Street, near where Mickenberg Deli used to be. In the same location. And then they moved to St. Patrick's.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention that also on Rideau Street, and this probably would have been very close to where the original bakery was, but my great uncle Liebman Kardash had a first store. Liebman was the brother of Abe and David. And I think the building is still there next to the Sandy Hill Center. And he passed the store along to his son, Mo Kardash. He was M. Kardash Creation First.
Hi, I just have a couple of things I wanted to mention. You just mentioned Rideau Plumbing and Heating. My Uncle Harry.
Can't hear you.
My Uncle Harry, I think, was also a partner in, I'm not sure.
Speak in, speak
It
in
was
the
involved with
microphone.
Rideau Plumbing and Heating. And the other thing about Freeman's.
Hold the mic like.
The other thing about Freeman's was every Christmas, their storefront would be loaded
Yes.
with Christmas things.
Yeah.
And there was a train
Yeah.
in Toyland, and I would go every Christmas and sit on Santa's knee and ask for a Hanukkah gift. Remember that? It was great.
And the malted milk and ice.
Hi, adding to all the excitement on Rideau Street, there was a plumbing competition, and back in the mid-40s, I worked for Palmer Plumbing Supplies. Some of you, or many of you may remember Abe and Bertha Palmer, who was, they were very cultural people. And right after the war, when I was a teenager, Mr. Palmer hired me for a summer job. And in those days, there was a tremendous shortage of bathroom supplies. And one day, a freight car came in. And the freight car was loaded with sinks and toilets and what have you. And they had 24 hours to clear it out. And Mr. Palmer got a hold of an old truck, and he had 3 of us unload this freight car. And because I was the smallest person in this group of workers, I had to ride shotgun on top of all these toilets. So, adding to the Freeman story, like so many Ottawa kids, Freeman's was a place for getting a job for a Jewish kid.
Yeah.
And one of my best jobs there was running the Lionel train setup. They used to do in the toy department. And sitting there playing with the toy trains, the electric trains. So I have fond memories of Rideau Street.
I also had a summer job at Freeman's. I was in the furniture department. And my job was cataloging the invoices for all the sales. I worked for the late Sam Victor. Remember Sam? A wonderful summer experience. I also remember, in addition to the deli mates, Mickenberg's was really a fine establishment. A lot of memories.
Well, as you saw, actually on the screen, my father actually was a hairdresser, and he started off as a barber from England. Okay, he was trained on Fleet Street in England, and he came and he actually, yeah, that's right, there he is there. But he started off as a barber, and he actually shaved all the prime ministers because he was on Spark Street, okay, and they would come down and in the morning, and he was a young person, but he used, you know, like the straight razor, and they did such a good job that they wanted him to actually continue, but he wanted to get into women's because that's, in a sense, where more the money was. So actually, Ogilvy's had a beauty salon, and there were other beauty salons. So he actually went to Mr. Freeman, and he said, you know, the other department stores have beauty salons as a unit, and I think that you should open a beauty salon as well. So he allowed my father, okay, to talk about it, and he said, well, you know what? I have 2 daughters. This is Mr. Freeman. And if you would do their hair, and they like it, I'll open the beauty salon for you. Well, as my father said it in his English accent, okay, or my mother as well, that they loved the hairdos that my father did. And so he said, and Mrs. Freeman as well, that he was delighted. They were delighted with their hair done. And of course, he opened the beauty salon, and he actually promoted products and what have you. And he saw that, you know, after a while, maybe he should open up his own beauty salon because, you know, to have the money, and he had a brother who also was a hairdresser. And so they opened up on Spark Street. And I remember as a kid standing, and was across from Fisher's. Fisher's was on Spark Street, and he was across the street. And there was the Center Theater, the movie theater, right? And I remember saying that I guess that there was a movie star that came, and they stood me up at the window. I think it was the last name was Scott. Yeah, Scott. Randolph Scott. Right. That's right. And I saw Randolph Scott. And I loved it. So anyway, and then of course he decided to, Fisher's, okay, bought the building. And so he had to make up his mind whether it would be really dependent on Fisher's allowing him or taking over. And that's when he moved to Rideau Street, to Rideau Street.
How long did he operate?
Oh, well, he was the 40 years. Yeah, and then.
Yeah, maybe you should do a talk here. Anybody else? Yeah.
In addition to the retail component, Freeman's department store, how many of us remember going down to the basement to get a malted milk? Now, to me, when you talk about Freeman's department store, I immediately think of those malted milk.
If you think about malted milk from Freeman, then you have to think of my Aunt Frida from Nate's, sitting in her chair, right inside the door and greeting everyone that walked in. And my father kibitzing with everybody, and all us kids working there.
My grandparents were Dora and Casper Kaplan. And to let you know a little something about my grandmother, Dora, she was also. My grandparents were Dora and Casper Kaplan, and I lived with my grandparents for quite a long time. And my grandmother, you should know, was an entrepreneur. My grandmother really had the brains behind the business. I don't know, my grandfather probably did too, but I think my grandfather was a very social person. My grandmother wanted everything a certain way, and she was a smart cookie.
Anyone else? Stephen, thank you for the most interesting talk. As you just heard in the last few minutes, most of us who are here tonight have special memories of the Rideau Street Jewish-owned businesses. It could be where you got your first bar mitzvah suit, or your wedding gown, or your challah or rye bread at Rideau Bakery, or your groceries at the IGA. And this has already been mentioned, but I didn't mention it again, malted milk at Freeman's. The best way was when they had just taken the glass out of the dishwasher, and you had the cold malted milk in the warm glass. It was a sensation that I really miss. And just like the talk I gave last year at this time on the Byward Market, your talk painted a picture of what was and is for the most part gone. Having these lectures and collecting the archival materials that Tegan and her crew look after help to paint a picture for those who are relatively new to our city, or for anyone else who wishes to research something from this community's vibrant past. Perhaps, David, you will consider doing a sequel, just like I've been asked to do on the market, to bring more of our history alive. Thank you again. And
Thank you all.
welcome to the presentation for you. First of all, the bag displays names of Jewish-owned businesses in Market or Rideau Street or elsewhere that are no longer in existence. We have a mug featuring pictures of Rideau Street businesses. And of course, the book, Common Threads, and tells the story of the Jewish community value. And all of these things are available to help. Thank you once again, thank you. Now, please enjoy the refreshments at the back. Thank you for coming out tonight.